right, let's go to our guest line. As promised, it is Monday, so that means we're joined by Mike McAllister, publisher of Syracuse On 24/7 Sports. Mike, great to have you on again. How are you today?
I'm doing well. After Paulie's comment, I'm wondering what being in the zone as a flute player looks like.
Yeah, you got to be like, just imagine him just ripping. Did you play an instrument in high school or?
Nah, I didn't do any of that.
Neither did I.
Yeah, not my thing.
Steve, did you?
No, I did not.
None of us have played an instrument. Okay.
No. I took 1 year of guitar lessons because I had to take either art or music in high school, and if you know me, you know that I have not an artistic bone in my body, so I did not want to take art, and I took guitar to satisfy that requirement, and I didn't really learn much at all. So there you go.
I was in chorus for a couple of years. I did do that.
Oh.
I don't know if that counts.
That counts. It's not an instrument.
I have a horrible voice in radio and singing.
Yeah, you don't want to hear me sing either, Mike. All right, we do want to hear you talk about SU sports, though, and I guess let's start with what was pretty big recruiting weekend, right? You talked about how the dead period was over. They were able to bring some guys on campus. Bring us up to date with what we need to know.
Well, the main thing is Syracuse is keeping things close to the vest in terms of who is actually on campus, but we do have a few names, one of which I just posted an article on. Arden Pouncey, or Adrian Pouncey, I should say, four-star cornerback in the 2026 class, ranked 183rd overall by 24/7 Sports. So this is an elite prospect from Florida. He's got offers from every major conference, bunch of schools around the country. He could have been anywhere this weekend. One of the Florida schools, Georgia's after him, so that's obviously pretty close to home. A lot of schools he could have been at. Chose to come up to Central New York and spend a weekend at Syracuse.
Is he any relation?
Amazing.
Is he any relation to the other Pounceys, like the famous?
I don't think so,
okay.
But I don't know for 100% sure. The other Pounceys were all very large.
Yes, correct.
He is not large in terms of being, close to 300 pounds or around there. He is large for a cornerback in that he's about 6'4". He's very long, but different type of large for sure.
Gotcha.
So he was up there. There was an offensive lineman whose name is Xavier Payne. He is playing in Florida, but is originally from Central New York, is my understanding. When he tweeted out last week that he was coming, he said, excited to be back in my hometown. So Syracuse is recruiting him. He's got a bunch of power conference offers as well. And then they had a bunch of commits up on campus, including Byron Washington, who was the 6'8", 380-pound lineman from Texas. He was one of the few commits that didn't take an official visit last month in June. And so there was some concern, like, well, what was the reason? Well, why wasn't he up? He simply had a personal schedule conflict and wasn't able to make it up with stuff that he and his family had going on. So he was able to make it up this weekend. So he came up, and they had a bunch of other underclassmen 2026, 2027 recruits up on campus as well. But like I said, they're keeping a lot of those names close to the vest.
It's our first time to talk to you since ACC Media. I'm calling it Media Week because it's 4 days long. We heard Syracuse talk on Thursday. Anything stand out to you from either Fran Brown's comments or the comments from the players?
Nothing too crazy. I thought the story about Kyle McCord and the long-standing relationship he had with Fran Brown, and how it was actually his wife that kind of first introduced Fran to Kyle McCord. As I guess his wife used to work with Kyle's dad, I think was the way that relationship worked. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But otherwise, it's a lot of the things that we've kind of already heard to this point, and I think getting that message out there nationally in terms of player reaction to Fran Brown and expectations and how they're taking in the new systems and the new coaches. I think all of that was a lot of things that we've heard from the various media opportunities that we've had here locally, but they were able to push that out a little bit more nationally, but kind of a similar message to some of the things we've heard before.
What about that little anecdote that kind of got out there, Fran Brown saying Aronde Gatson told me if I get a quarterback, he'll stay. If I don't get a quarterback, he's gone. I had not heard that. Had you heard that previously?
I had heard rumblings about that indirectly. I had not heard anything definitively directly from either Aronde or one of the coaches. So I had heard that was the rumor when, the rumors about Kyle McCord visiting and his interest in Syracuse and Syracuse's interest in him, that the rumor was if Syracuse gets him, then Aronde's staying. If they don't, then he probably isn't. So because at that point, there wasn't another quarterback that Syracuse was seriously linked with to that point. So it seemed like it was a package deal, but I hadn't heard anything definitive. But it makes sense, right? If you're Aronde Gadsden, the money isn't a huge deal. He's financially set given, his family situation, his dad playing in the NFL for a number of years. So he doesn't need to go after a huge payday to support his family. And he wants to make sure that wherever he has a good quarterback throwing him the ball so that he can showcase his skills and improve his draft stock. And so he likes being here. He likes Central New York. He likes Syracuse. This is where he's been. This is where he was, a all ACC performer as a tight end, and he wants to be here. And I think the fact that he went to Fran Brown and basically said, look, if you get a quarterback, I'm here, I think that also tells you that he wants to be here. He just wanted to make sure that by staying, it was in the best situation for him in terms of on-the-field production.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I like you said, we hadn't heard it put that bluntly, right? I mean, Fran Brown just said, that was the deal. It was very black and white, and they made it happen. They got Kyle McCord, and now Aronde Gadsden is back. Last football question before we move on to basketball. With camp about to start, what is your biggest question mark from a position group with this team? Is it the offensive line? Is it a different unit?
It's definitely the offensive line. It's not because they haven't addressed it with bringing in recruits and bringing in transfers, because there's several new faces here. There are multiple guys who are returning who played last year, played a bunch of snaps, et cetera. It's just you have a new offense. You have a new offensive line coach. You have a bunch of new faces, and the new faces that are coming in are not guys that have either A, power conference experience, or B, some of them don't have any. They transfer, you look at Josh Miller from Georgia, didn't really play at Georgia, was only there a year, was a very highly regarded recruit, and is coming in, and I think Syracuse thinks that his talent is certainly there, but until you actually see someone play, and, they got a couple of transfers, one from an HBCU and another from a non-power conference, you just never know how those things are going to translate. So there's a lot of question marks there, not a lot of proven, like, oh, that guy had 47 starts at the Big Ten level, so we're excited about what he's going to do. They had that last offseason with David Wollaba. I mean, he was coming in, had started a bunch of games at Kentucky, but even though he's coming back, he's coming off of an injury. So how does he react to that? There's so many unknown things, so many question marks there that to me is the biggest thing. Because if that group is even average to above average, you feel like everything else is in place that the offense should be really good.
All right, let's talk some basketball now, and let's talk Ryder Frost. Recently on campus for an official visit. What can you tell us about him? What can you tell us about where Syracuse stands?
Yeah, he's a 6'6", sort of shooting guard, small forward, hybrid, sort of in between, can play either spot. Really good shooter, good off the bounce. Honestly, a lot of the scouting report stuff that you read on him is similar to what you saw from Justin Taylor coming out of high school. Now, that doesn't mean that he's going to end up, if he picks Syracuse, having the same career at Syracuse, but just kind of giving a frame of reference in terms of what you read about him. But he's got a lot of other power conference schools after him, similar to what Justin did, and he's going to take some more visits. And I think Syracuse has positioned itself well with extending the offer, kind of jumping the gun and beating some of those other schools from extending their offers, and then getting him on campus pretty quickly for a visit. I think they've certainly made a big impression. They're in touch with him on a regular basis. But anytime you have a recruit that's going to take multiple other visits before deciding, you never know. So there's nothing here that feels like Syracuse is a definitive leader, or it would be a shock if he goes anywhere from but Syracuse. Nothing definitive like that, but I certainly think that Syracuse has made a good early impression.
We do assume that Syracuse is the leader when it comes to Kyan Anthony. He did trim his list down to 6, as he promised. He said, after Peach Jam and things settle down, going to narrow the list to 6, and then he hopes to make that decision public sometime before the start of the next basketball season. what can you tell us, I guess, about where things stand with him? And, he said he's going on visits to all these schools. Should Syracuse fans be concerned by that?
I think anytime you have a recruit that is taking several visits before deciding, especially if you're considered the leader, then yes, there should be some level of concern. Now, do I think that means panic time? All of a sudden, he's definitely not coming or anything like that. I think that's too far of an overreaction. The positive news with the top six is no Indiana. And they were a school that was long rumored to be one of Syracuse's biggest threats because of Carmelo's relationship with Indiana head coach Mike Woodson. So the fact that they're not in it, I think, is good news for Syracuse. Several of the schools on his list, 3 or 4 of them are schools that are relatively new to his recruitment. He hasn't really visited, doesn't have real long-standing relationships with those coaches. I think that's good. There's 2 schools, I think, if you're a Syracuse fan, that would, quote-unquote, concern me the most. The first being Florida State, because they've been recruiting him as long as anyone. In an article that he did with 24/7 Sports, one of our national writers, Deshaun London, I believe, is the one that interviewed him, he called them the OGs of his group of 6 schools, meaning they were the ones that were on him first. And so how much of a impact does that have? He's already visited there once. He wants to return. That's a school that I would be a little bit concerned with. The other is Auburn, because we know that they have recruited extremely well since Bruce Pearl has been there. Bruce Pearl has had his things that follow him around, we'll say, from past stops, but we know that he recruits extremely aggressively. I think if they decided that they really, really wanted Kyan and needed to get him and made him one of, if not their top priority in the class, they'd throw a bunch of money at him. So I don't know how much of a factor that would be for him, but those are 2 schools that I would be at least a little bit concerned with. And then I think Rutgers is also there because he's got a relationship with their 2 highly touted recruits that are going there this year, although the downside to that from a Rutgers standpoint is that those 2 players, if all things go according to plan, will be off to the NBA after this year. So there's a lot of things at play here, but I still think that Syracuse is considered the favorite at this juncture.
I kind of took it as the Indiana not being in a really good sign for Syracuse, because if you're really leaning one way, you want to tell somebody that you got a good relationship with, hey, you might want to look elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point as well. And the only, I guess, playing devil's advocate to that would be if he has as good of a relationship with the Florida State coaches as he claims he does in all of his interviews, then you would think he would do the same thing with them perhaps. But this could also go back to the relationship that Mike Woodson has with Carmelo's dad. And if Carmelo's dad is saying, listen, we're going to put out a top 6. We know he's not going there. You know he's not coming there because he's going to Syracuse, but he's just going through the process. We're not going to string you guys along. We're going to leave you out of the top 6, but it's no disrespect to you. I don't know if that conversation happened, but that's a conversation that I could see realistically happening in terms of what you just said regarding the relationship that they have.
What about this mysterious player that we've been hearing about recently? We've asked you a couple times about a potential player from a foreign country. Any word on that yet?
Nothing, and I'm starting to wonder if that chance came and went, because at this point, if that were going to happen, you'd want to get someone on campus and into classes and going through workouts and practicing with the team and all those types of things. And so if you don't have anyone there at this point, not to say it's impossible, but it's going to be August in a couple of days. So chances are, I would say, dwindling the longer this goes. And if you get to, mid to late August and there's still been nothing, then I think that tells you the roster is what it is at this current juncture, and that's what they're going to go into the season with.
All right, Mike, great stuff as always. Anything else we didn't touch on you want to get across to our listeners?
I don't think so. I think we hit on all the major points. I think we expect that we'll be getting a training camp schedule here shortly for football, and so we're about a month away, and I think pretty soon we're going to start having camp coverage, and we'll start analyzing and overreacting to what these guys look like in shorts and t-shirt, and make prognostications on how that's going to affect their November games against Boston College because of how this offensive lineman moved in shorts against the pad. So looking forward to all of those overreactions and all of that analysis that we'll have in the coming weeks. I
was just going to say, after going through the summer, I'm looking forward to it as well. I'm sure you are too. So, Mike, be well, and we'll talk to you again, very soon, probably again next Monday if Paulie has his way.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, guys.
All right, Mike McAllister on McAllister Monday. We're going to take a time out here. We'll wrap up hour number 1 next. Max Chadwick from Pro Football Focus joins us at 1 o'clock. Back after this on ESPN Radio.